Okay, welcome to our channel once again. I think in our last video, also on electric vehicles, I did mention that our next video was going to be on Brexit. Obviously, to find out where we are with Brexit. Do we re-establish good relationship with the Europeans? Do we advocate to basically look out for a way to rejoin? What is it? Or are we happy where we are? So this was going to be the next video. However, I came across this article by Vicky Parrott, written on the 2nd of February 2025 in the Telegraph. And so this kind of caught my attention, and I thought this will be a good way to end the episode on electric vehicles. So some of the challenges of electric vehicles are being like, sort of charging your battery. So it gives you a top range of about 311 miles. Some of them are 280, depending. However, there are times that when you charge, it will say full battery, but then it will give you a range of 270 miles. When I've queried that with the provider or supplier of the charging service, they tell me, oh, sometimes the weather is cold, sometimes it's the way you drive. There were a multiple of excuses that I couldn't personally explain. And so in more recent times, as the weather warms up, I can see sometimes a full charge giving me 308 miles. And obviously we talk about the idea that, when you're driving, make sure you don't run out of battery and, blah, 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 a whole lot. And obviously find a place, to charge on the way if you're on a long journey. The issue is the cost. So based on a video that I made, making the assumption that obviously the poor guy didn't have a drive, the rich guy had a drive. The rich guy who had a drive was charging at about £7 a night, and the poor guy who didn't have a drive and having to use, say, a Shell supercharge or Instavolt supercharge was paying nearly 89 pence per kilowatt hour. The difference is per annum if the person was using the car 6 days was £19,500. So the poor guy was losing £19,500. So, this basically goes on to exacerbate inequalities. And so when you are told that, yes, find a place along the way to charge, that is not what you want to do. You want to charge your vehicle at a reasonable rate or a reasonable price. And so there is that possibility that people will come to a situation where their batteries are running almost flat. This has happened to me before. The worst time that I've had was when I had about 5% of battery, probably less than 15 miles of drive time to reach a charging spot. Some of the challenges, as I've mentioned in previous videos, are you get to it will direct you to go to a charging point. When you get there, there is only one charging point and it's out of order. Or there's only one charging point that you may need to leave the car the whole night. It's a slow charge, a 7 kilowatt charger. Or you get there and somebody has just arrived charging their vehicle, and therefore you may then have to wait probably at a maximum of around about 3 hours, basically for that person to finish in an hour and a half and for you to also finish in an hour and a half. So these are all challenges. What I find particularly interesting in this article by Vicky Parrott was the fact that she talks about, obviously, the challenge that that you may run out of petrol or diesel, or in a diesel or in a petrol vehicle, on a countryside or in a place where you cannot reach any filling station and may have to depend on recovery services of the AA or Green Flag or whatever to rescue you. In as much as she mentioned that these are very stressful moments, the situation is exacerbated when you are actually driving an electric vehicle and you indeed run out of battery. So let's go on to read this article to see what Vicky is trying to tell us. Obviously, she is an expert writing on electric vehicles. And so, if you have any plans to buy an electric vehicle, you must basically educate yourself and become aware of these potential challenges, and then decide if indeed what you really want is a self charging hybrid vehicle. I mean, these vehicles I think are great, and personally, I think this is what we are ready for at this moment in the United Kingdom and probably in most of the Western countries, because a self charging hybrid will drop into electric mode once it hits about sort of under 25 miles an hour, which is the speed limits that are set, especially here in London or in most major cities in the United Kingdom, sorry. So here we go. What is Vicky Parrott saying? He says, what happens when an electric vehicle runs out of charge? Whether you own an EV or are thinking of getting one, here is what you need to know in the event of the battery becoming fully drained. Okay. So let's get into this. And so this is it's a real, this is a situation that can easily happen to anyone, or even if it's not really happening, just the anxiety of you driving your electric vehicle and you begin to see this flashing warning signs in your dashboard, knowing that you have either 10 or less than 10% of battery left, and realizing that you cannot see any charging points in the vicinity where you are, and the added anxiety that even if you do find one, would it be a slow charging one that will keep you there overnight? Would it be just one charging point where there will be somebody there charging already? So therefore you're seeing yourself charging probably 3 hours after you have arrived? Or could it be even more, where you find a sort of a 22 kilowatt charging point, which may take you about 3.5 hours to fully charge? So let's get into this. It's every motorist's nightmare, running out of fuel, being stranded at the roadside of the road and having to walk to the nearest garage for a can of petrol, or having to rely on recovery services to get you going again. But in an electric car, that fear is multiplied. So that is indeed, if you get stuck, in a diesel or a petrol car, you can flag somebody. They can help you out, take you to the next station, bring you back. You put that whatever gallon or whatever you get into your vehicle, and that should help you drive to that next station to top up. But this is not the same when you have an electric vehicle. What happens then? Can the car be towed? Does it damage the battery or runs out of charge altogether? Will it need a software reset? So these are the questions. Well, don't panic. An electric car that's stranded with no charge isn't unheard of, and the rescue services are equipped to deal with it. Interestingly, a driver's education and charging infrastructure improves, the number of out of charge call out has decreased to an all-time low of 1.97% of EV breakdowns attended by the AA in 2024, equivalent to 2,940 call outs. For context, out of charge call outs were 2.26% in 2023 and 0.72% in 2022, whilst the AA finds that a consistent 1% of call outs to combustion engine cars is because they have run out of fuel. And so statistics are always very nice. When you are writing about anything, you bring in these statistics, it makes you feel good. But the reality is that this thing can happen to you and I at any time. And when it does happen to you, these statistics will mean nothing. And so, indeed, there is a problem. But my own advocacy is the fact that if you know, this thing is really kicked off. These electric vehicles are coming in. So my question is, government set up and step up the infrastructure. Also, look at the pricing, how the variation in pricing, where somebody is charging at 89 pence per kilowatt hour and somebody is charging at 7 pence per kilowatt hour. How do you reconcile the differences? Driving 6 days under these different price differential, you're picking up a cost of £19,500 difference. And this cost is mostly picked by the have-nots. These may be private hire drivers that are conditioned to have these electric vehicles by the Transport for London. So these people are not rich people. These are ordinary people living in council estates or living in houses that do not have drives. And they are paying £19,500 more. Then you have the issue of, well, if you do find a charging spot, to get a price, it's not even a decent price compared to petrol and diesels. They want you to subscribe to and download apps. So imagine that if I was going to a filling station to top up my petrol or diesel engine, I'm asked to download an app for Shell, for BP, for Total, or for Tesco or Sainsbury Petrol in order to get a good price or so-called a decent price. This cannot work because how many of these apps do you need? And these apps, they will be taking a subscription fee of an average of £10.99 per month from your account. So if you have about 10 of these apps, just to keep you secured, as in you going around everywhere, then that means you may have something around about £100 to £120 come off your account every month for virtually using no services at all. So these are the things that the government needs to basically get involved and do something about it. Today, with more than 1.36 million electric cars on the roads in the UK, the more common reason for the EV breakdown call out are broken charging point connectors or driver education around charge point operations. So you can see there you are, 1.36 million vehicles in the UK. That is a whole lot of electric vehicles, and UK government should look into how people are, how it's costing the average person to charge these vehicles in accordance with their incomes. What are the groups of people that are conditioned to have these vehicles? What are the average incomes? Why should they pay over the odds? And these people would have preferred having their diesel and petrol engines. But if they are conditioned to buy these electric vehicles by governments to save the environment and help the environment, then why should they be paying over the odds? So this is my advocacy. Something must be done. Can an electric car be towed? Most can't. That is why roadside recovery service will always ask whether you are an electric car or not, sending a flatbed rescue truck if necessary. However, Tesla and Nissan EVs have a tow mode setting that can be enabled, and yes, the car will literally crawl to a halt when the battery charge is spent. And so, yes, there is an issue about EVs being towed, but as mentioned here, Teslas and Nissans have that mode that can be set. But if you do run out and your screen goes blank, then this may become a problem, even if the rescue truck from the AA or green flag does arrive. One issue, however, is that some EVs, including Tesla, will even run the 12-volt system battery flat to maintain progress if you continue to drive. The problem with this is that when the 12-volt as well as the high voltage track battery is drained, the touch screen and other auxiliary won't work, and you need the screen to activate the tow mode. So this is what I mentioned earlier. As we go on, you can jump start the 12-volt battery in an EV in the same way as you jump start or trickle charge the battery in an internal combustion engine ICE car. But if you are at the point of running out of charge and being stranded, it is usually best to stop before the battery is fully drained. So the advice is there for you to see clearly. But better to stop when you are, and as we say, better to stop when you are in a countryside somewhere remote. How do you reconcile this situation? Two-wheel drive electric cars can also be towed provided the driven wheels are lifted. Allowing an EV-driven vehicle to turn while being towed can damage the brake regeneration system and other electrical system if it doesn't have a dedicated tow mode. And so I think my electric vehicle is a four-wheel, it's an all-wheel drive, and so you can see here that can be a problem if you try to tow it, because if it's a two-wheel drive, then surely as long as the drive side of the wheels are up and running on the other sides, then it should be all right. But an all-wheel drive, there will be a problem. The good news is that roadside recovery services offer a variety of solutions. According to the RAC, an ever-increasing number of our petrol vans have been built in emergency mode charging system capable of giving an out-of-charge electric car enough power to be driven a short distance home or to a working charge point, whilst our all-wheel up recovery system allows our petrols to safely rescue electric cars with no need for a flatbed. Given that towing capabilities vary depending on the EV in question, it's well worth checking the car's handbook or speaking to a specialist to learn the best practice for your make and model in case of a breakdown or flat battery. Otherwise, it is safe to assume that EVs cannot be towed, and ask your roadside assistance company to provide a low loader or alternative rescue method. So there you go. This is stressful. Yes. How much warning does the car give you? Again, this will vary depending on the model, but also will give you an audible and visual warning when you reach a low state of battery, often around 15 to 20%. Most modern EVs will offer to find the nearest charging point via navigation. So in reality, these warnings comes on when you're about 10% of your battery, and probably 10% may give you probably about between 20 and 30 miles. And so this is when it really comes on, and you need to find a place depending on where you are. You will get another warning as the charge level decreases, with the warning becoming more frantic between 5 and 10% until eventually the car will reduce power and speed, switching into what becomes known as tortoise mode to conserve energy. This phrase was coined after the MK1 Nissan Leaf, which shows a turtle on the dashboard when it reduces power to maximize range due to a very low level of charge. Expect every EV to drastically reduce the available power and top speed when the battery charge becomes dangerously low. When this happens and you are not confident of reaching a charging point, find a safe place to stop and contact a recovery service while retaining some power so that you can keep hazard lights, touchscreen, and other auxiliary functioning. It can make your wait on the roadside both safer and more comfortable. It can also be very helpful with diagnosing and solving the issue when a rescue service arrives. So there you go. You must not run those batteries to the very low or flat. Otherwise, screen goes off and things become a lot difficult when rescue services arrive. In short, every EV will give plenty of warning before the power runs out. Try to factor in charging stops when charge has dropped to 20% when you are on a long journey, so you have plenty of range to find alternative charging if there is a problem. So this is indeed a problem, because most of these electric vehicles, especially in London, are mostly private hire drivers that are using these vehicles, and these are working people. And so the challenge that you have is that you could be on a job. And then your battery starts draining, because the reality is that when you're driving locally, it is very good for your battery, because anytime you brake, that is with lots of traffic lights and the stop and the go, these are good for the battery, because whenever you step on the brake and the obviously the torque reduces, it goes into this sort of recycling mode, which then reduces how much the battery is draining. But where a working person may underestimate how much battery power they have actually occurs on the motorway, because on the motorway, let's say your battery says you can travel 150 miles. On the motorway, in reality, it's about 100 miles, because once you step on that accelerator, the battery drains constantly. So when you think that you have a range of about 150, in reality, it's about 100 or 110. And so as a working person, you can mistaken the fact that you have enough. But it's when you hit the motorway, then you realize that battery is like going so fast, reducing so fast. And then this is when you get trapped and you find yourself in deep waters. So this idea about, when it gets to 20%, try to plan, you may find that you have a plan, but in reality, that plan doesn't really work. Does running out of charge damage the battery? It isn't good practice to completely discharge the high voltage battery. The lithium NMC battery that powers many EVs are best maintained between 20 to 80% charge in routine use to maintain longevity, although using the full available charge for intermittent long journeys won't do any harm. Similarly, using slow charging for every day, topping up and reserving rapid charges for occasional long drives will help to keep the battery in good condition, since repeated rapid charging can also accelerate battery degeneration. So there you go. Constant rapid charges are no good. Lithium iron phosphate batteries, also very common, found in MG, Tesla, and BYD cars, amongst others, are typically more resilient to rapid charging. Tesla even recommends charging the LFP batteries in rear-wheel drives standard range Model 3 to 100% once a week to maintain the best performance and longevity. Even so, while running a battery flat won't help the long-term degradation. Won't help the long-term degradation. When your battery is charged again, it will function as normal. And so once again, we see the different types of batteries. This may not be knowledge to the average person, and so different types of batteries in different cars responding differently to basically how you charge them, whether you charge them 80% or 100%, or whether you use a rapid charge or a slow charge. Will the car need a software reset or other repairs after it runs out of charge? The high voltage batteries will be fine, but running out of charge can damage the 12-volt battery in some EVs. Tesla states that if you allow the battery to discharge to 0%, other components may become damaged or require replacement, for example, the low voltage battery. I speak from personal experience, having once run out of charging in a Tesla Model 3. If the 12-volt becomes faulty, it won't stop your onwards progress. Once the high voltage battery is charged, the EV will be perfectly safe and drivable, but there may be some software glitches. I had issues with the battery preconditioning when working, which meant that rapid charging speeds were reduced. A visit to dealers showed that 12-volt battery needed replacing, which resolved all the faults. Other electric cars can have similar glitches following a total discharge of the battery, especially if the 12-volt gets drained to a very low charge at the same time as the main battery. A Jeep Avenger long-term test car broke down and refused to charge, with the result that the 12-volt had to be disconnected and reconnected in order to get moving again. There were also minor glitches with the touchscreen until a trip to the dealer for a reset. Regardless of each EV you drive, don't be surprised if you have to visit a dealer for an official reset if you have run out of charge, especially if the 12-volt battery also ran flat. And so somebody makes a comment here to say, let's go up there to see that comment, which says, it says, I drove an electric car over 3,000 miles in 3 months. It tested my sanity. So that is another article. But thank you once again for watching this last episode of electric vehicles and their challenges. And so definitely our next video, we are going to get into this issue of Brexit, as in how good has it been to us as a nation? How do we feel when we meet our European Union neighbors? How does young people feel about their restrictions in going into any of these EU countries to work for holidays and others? Thank you once again for watching our channel. Have a good night.